So I do think that as members of a historically marginalized community, it's not just our responsibility, but it would be very hypocrite of us to just turn our backs to what is happening in the world. Hi. So my name is Marco Carfagnini. I use he and they as pronouns. And my profession is I'm an assistant professor of mathematics at the University of Melbourne. So I think there are two aspects to my profession, teaching and research. And I feel that everyone has an idea what teaching is like, even in math. I want to talk more about research because, I don't know, I think it's very hard to explain math research, even to other mathematicians. So what I do as a mathematician, we don't work in labs. I don't really do data analysis. There is no experiment that is being run. So most of my job is I'm sitting, I have a notebook and I just scribble things down. And hopefully one day they will make sense. And at some point, once you have a bunch of good ideas, that you can turn them into a paper. Usually most of the work is just you read other papers, what other people have done, and you try to think about, what can I add to it? Is there something else I can do? So what I like about my job is that I can do it from wherever I want. Because again, I don't need a lab. I only need paper, pen, and Wi-Fi connection. So I'm a probabilist. You enter in a dark, dusty room, okay? Now you're inside this room and there is one window, so you see a beam of light. And then you want to look at that beam of light. If you ever notice that, you're gonna see a bunch of dust particles and you see them moving. But they're not gonna move necessarily down. They're not gonna go downward. Some of them are gonna go left, some of them are gonna right, up. Why? Why is that happening? Because physics teaches us that truly what's happening is you have these dust particles which are kind of suspended in a gas, and the gas particles are really pushing, bombarding left and right, those dust particles, and that's why they're moving. So imagine how you do the following thing. So what I study is where the motion of these particles, where do they go, how they're gonna go. Now imagine that each particle is only a marker. So as they move, this specific particle is moving, it's gonna draw its trajectory or its path. I study path spaces, it's very cool, but this is path. So imagine you have two distinct dust particles. Of course, they're gonna have different trajectories, different paths, but what I'm looking at is, do they have some analogies? Do they share something? Do they have something in common? For example, as time goes on, meaning as days, hours, minutes pass by, what happens to these trajectories? How do they behave? And it turns out that it doesn't matter which particle you look at. As time goes on, they all have the same behavior. And this is related mathematically to what we call functional analysis. Functional analysis is a very abstract area of math that studies infinite dimensional spaces. And the reason why I like that is because, as I just told you, I care about path and trajectories. And if you look at the set of all possible trajectories, that is a very big set. And in math, we would say that's an infinite dimensional set. So you need tools from this very abstract area of math, functional analysis, to help you describe something that is actually very tangible, very the movement of the dust particles. And my research specifically is understanding these trajectories, but imagine that they are not moving in space, in the room. Imagine that the dust particles are constrained to being on a table or on a sphere. So my questions are, does the shape of the constraint, is that going to affect the behavior of the trajectories in some sense? So it's a little bit of a mix of geometry, this functional analysis, probability, because this movement is random, and it has a name, it's called Brownian motion. And what I find even cooler, and that's kind of what I love about math, is that if you look at, I'm going to tell you something completely different. Forget about path and trajectories and dust. Think about the stock market. So think about how the stock market changes from now to 10 minutes from now. Now, if you think of that as the way it changes in time, that is going to have the same exact behavior as the dust particles. So what I love about math is that it's so abstract in the sense that it seems so abstract and far from reality, but really what you're doing is you're coming up with a very abstract, I said abstract many times, but it's really abstract way of describing things, and that way is going to apply to so many different cases, like movement of dust particles, fluctuations of stock market, and I've always found that versatility of math so, I don't know, just cool and beautiful.
I guess could you talk a little bit about how do you identify within the LGBTQIA plus community?
That's a very good question because it has sort of not changed, but I really questioned myself the last, I would say, 2 months about that. So I've come to the following realization: I'm a cis gay man, but for a few months I was actually thinking about whether I was more on the non-binary spectrum or like gender fluid. Literally 2 weeks ago, as I was thinking about it and talking to a friend, I realized I'm very comfortable being a man, but I do think of fluidity as part of my identity, but it's not necessarily how I identify, meaning, it sounds weird, but what I mean is that I'm very much okay with being a man, but I like to wear nail polish. I maybe like to wear clothes that, maybe I wear from a women's section, like the store. And so what I realized is that I don't have issues, or I do not question my personal gender identity as a man, but I do question what society thinks about what a man should be like. So that is the thing that I don't like. So in that sense, I do like to be more fluid, but definitely a cis gay man. So I grew up in the suburbs of Rome, Italy, not New York. I once had that someone asked me oh, Rome, New York. I'm like, no. I didn't really have a community growing up in the sense that I was very introverted as a kid. I hated elementary school. Did not like my hometown. It just doesn't even feel like home. It's just a town. But thankfully, my parents have 2 older siblings. They were always very supportive. I remember being called names, bullied in elementary school, and my mindset was, I need to get out of here. As of right now, I only have 1 friend left from my childhood. We're very close. But everyone else, I'm like, I don't see myself vibing with these people, very close-minded. So at some point when I was in middle school, I realized studying could have been my ticket out. So I just started putting more effort into if I have good grades, I can go to a good school and then I can apply, and then maybe that could be my way out. So it was kind of a natural, reaction to, I don't like the place where I am. Very small town vibe, and I feel that I need to be exposed to more. So that was my experience. And then my family was always very, as I said, very open-minded. I come from a working class family, and my parents, they didn't go to school. So on one hand, they had no idea what I was doing. But on the other hand, instead of telling me you should do this or that, they were like, do whatever you want to do. So I was lucky enough that they always let me do what I thought was the best for me.
And did you have any role models growing up?
No, because I was never sure about what I wanted to do with my life. So I guess there was never someone that I would look up to, neither from the LGBTQ plus community nor for the math community. I actually got into math very late in life. I realized I was gay very late in life. So growing up, I was always, just being more introverted and not looking up to anyone. And even if I think about potential queer role models, Italy 25 years ago, it's still a conservative country. And back then, I remember, if I think of the only gay men that were being portrayed through media were men obsessed with fashion. And I am not obsessed with fashion. So I was like, oh, maybe I'm not gay because all the gay people that I see, they do not look like me, or they don't have the same interests that I have. So I was like, I guess the answer is that I might just not be gay. I was wrong, clearly. But it took a long time to realize that. I like to think of it as that's what straight people at that time wanted gay men to behave and look like, as in, oh, you're a gay man, you must be ultra feminine, you must, you have to like fashion. I'm like, okay, but what if can I just be gay and like other things, So I do remember the day I came out. It's kind of funny. So I feel like all the writings are on the walls, meaning that I was playing with Barbies when I was like 5. And again, my parents were like, sure, if you want to do that, you can do that. But somehow it never clicked with me until my freshman year of college. And I remember it was December 9th, 2012. That was like, it was a very specific date because at that time, so it was my first year of college and I had met this guy and he had just come out and he didn't have any friends. So we were chatting every day back on when Facebook Messenger was a thing, like actually in your computer. And one time he asked me, do you want to go get like ice cream or something? I was like, sure. And in my mind, I thought as friends, because it was like, I'm straight, he's gay, but I am a friendly person. So like, sure, let's hang out. And I remember going on this, I guess it was a date. And then like after the date, I was just so happy. And I went to this birthday party of a friend. And I remember seeing this very good friend of mine. I was like, I think I'm gay. In life, for me, it always takes me a lot of time to make a decision or actually to realize what I want. But once I know what I want, I'm extremely stubborn and I go for it. So I guess that day, it just came to me as like, yeah, why have I never felt so happy? I had gone on dates with women. I'm like, I never felt that. So it's like, that is the only logical explanation that I'm gay. And I was like, cool. And I have to say that kind of changed my personality in a way that I became way more self-confident. I'm not the most self-confident person, but when I was younger, I was definitely not as self-confident at all. And realizing I was gay kind of opened my eyes to, okay, now this explains a lot of things, why you never had a girlfriend or why you never like did certain things. And I'm like, cool, so I have my answers and I can live my life as a gay like teenager. But then it took me 2 years to come out to my family because I was kind of scared and you never know how people are gonna react. And I had the best come out story. It was like remember telling my mom, and then I told her, please don't tell anyone else. I'll do it myself. And of course she told everyone. And I was like, in some sense, I'm like, great, I didn't have to do it myself, but also she took away that like bonding moment, but no, everyone was super chill. And like, I mean, my brother, he told me, yeah, I thought about it. Like some people thought that was the case or no, but again, everyone was very welcoming. So I guess it worked out really well. But I hated myself at that time of my life because I was being gay in the way that straight, like it was very heteronormative in the sense that at that time I had a partner. And so I was, 21, 22 years old. And that was right before I moved to the US. And I was walking in Rome with my partner, and we would not hold each other's hands. And I remember telling myself, oh, that's because that's how things work, right? Because I'm not supposed to show affection in public. And then flash forward like 5 years later, I'm in this country, and think about that, I'm like, what was wrong with me? I'm like, why was I not supposed to do that? And I've kind of, not that I hate myself for that, but it really shows you that the society where you grow up really does affect the way you think. And sometimes you do have this inner thought, like almost internalized homophobia about, oh, I shouldn't do that or behave that way because people here don't do it. And I'm like, fuck, why? Like that was, if I wanted to do it, I should just go and do it. So in some sense that not the best behavior, but not having the best behavior at that time has taught me that now if there's something that I want to do or I want to behave or look in a certain way, I'm just gonna do it. And that's the best feeling ever. So there's some good that came out of it.
And also sometimes it's for safety, like you don't, when you're
totally.
Experimenting, like you don't know how people are gonna react around you, and like we unfortunately have to think about those things.
Or you don't want to get beaten up like on the street. That is also a possibility, unfortunately. And it's like, it's kind of self-defense, but then I've grown to the point that I remember the first day I showed up to class, I was a TA with nail polish. And for me, I was so stressed about it. And then I realized, why should I be stressed? I'm like, And then I realized that it was all in my head because a lot of students in class, right after class, were like, oh my God, I like this color on you. Like even the straightest bro from like the soccer team was like, I really like your color. I'm like, you? I was like, out of everyone, I was not expecting this guy literally to say that. But I don't know, sometimes I realize that things are just in your head and you have to overcome your own thoughts.
Can you talk about like, where are you based now? And I guess can you talk us a little bit through you were born and raised in Italy, and then you lived on the East Coast, and then you lived in San Diego, and now you're off to Melbourne soon.
Right.
Can you talk us through that journey?
Yeah, so that was kind of, I don't know, like, I liked traveling. When I was a kid, that was something I liked. During my undergrad, I did like an exchange program in Germany. So that was my first time living abroad for like 7 months. And I realized that when I was there, most of the people I was interacting with were either Italians or from Spain. So I remember coming back to Italy and thinking, okay, it was a great experience, but I did not embrace it the way I should have embraced it. When I moved to the States, I was 23, and I remember telling myself, I don't want to have any Italian friend here. Not because I don't like Italians, but I felt I want to embrace and I want to really understand the culture of the country that I'm living in. And so I really got into like this East Coast like mentality, very much like fast paced, like you have to get things done. And that was for about 4.5 years. Then again, because of my job, I got to travel a lot. So first as a grad student, then as a postdoc. So I went from Connecticut to San Francisco. Amazing time, going from a suburban area to one of the, I think, most queer cities in the world. It was just amazing. And then I found myself in San Diego, and I was like, okay, very different, still California, but very different vibe from the Bay Area. And I don't know, I like to think that I learned a lot from different people. I got to meet a lot of people from different countries, different, I don't know, like backgrounds. So that's definitely stuck with me. And I got to the point that the last year kind of had an identity crisis, in the sense that not just with my queer identity, but my actual, it's like, who am I? Or like, as an adult, as a 30 years old man, how do I feel? What do I feel? I would go back to Italy, let's say once a year, visiting my family is there. And every time I would go back there, I mean, I love people there, my family, but it just doesn't, the country, the culture, it's not me. And I remember going through these thoughts during pandemic, because between 2020 and 2021 was not allowed to travel. So I stayed in Connecticut the whole time. And that's when I realized I feel Italian as a teenager, because all my teen years were in Italy, but as an adult, I do feel way more American than I am Italian, because the last 7-8 years of my life I was in this country. So I don't know how to do taxes in Italy. I've never bought a car in Italy. I've never had like a job in Italy. So there are all the things that I've never done there, but I did them here. And so that kind of shaped my personality in a way that I'm like half and half in some sense. I was low-key, not afraid of it, but scared. But then lately I realized that, it's the opportunity of when you get to travel a lot, and not just travel on vacations, but when you get to actually settle down and like live in a certain country, region, you're just not the same person. And so even in a country like the US, when I tell my friends back in Italy, I'm like, you just can't talk about the US as one thing. It's so huge. If you take someone from North Dakota, New Jersey, and like California, you're gonna have they speak the same language, but very, very different individual and like ideas and thoughts. I remember noticing immediately when I moved to like San Diego, the differences between like Connecticut, Boston vibe and like culture versus like a more chill, relaxed San Diego, Southern California like thing.
I like that notion of like the different places that you live in, that like you spend time in, even if it's not necessarily in your childhood, it still kind of raises you in a way, because we're still like learning new things as adults, right, and everything, and it still like influences who you are as a person. And like maybe if you go back to Italy and you try to buy a car, it's like now you have to like learn how to do that. Right, maybe it'll be frustrating, like
Exactly, but also I don't know. For me, the U.S. has such a huge, again, it's where I can say I developed as a person, but literally that I felt I moved and I just literally fresh off the boat. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I moved there. That was my very first time even visiting it, right? So I had no idea what to expect. And then it was like a cold shower, being in a very suburban area in Connecticut, after having lived in Rome, was just like, what is happening here? My very first hookup was in the US. It was in Connecticut, because even my queerness, even my my own personality when I was in Italy was very much, I guess, Italian in a way, right? So after having been in the US for so long, I don't know, I feel that I've like a sponge. I'm just like absorbing like what's around me. I'm very grateful that it helped me seeing things that I did not like of older Marco from like maybe 15 years ago, which doesn't mean that the person I am today is perfect, but at least, the experience of living in different countries helped me understand better like different personalities, but also when you speak different languages, you actually behave like a different person depending on the language you speak. So I can totally see when I go back and I speak Italian, and I only do that with my family, I'm not very different, but like I do know that I say things that I'm like, I wouldn't say that if I were in the US just because it doesn't sound like correct. I don't know, it's just funny. But I'm grateful that I got to embrace this diversity inside of me. So not just my queerness, but also I do like to think of it as a cultural diversity. And I wear Birkenstock with socks, and every time in Italy, my parents are like, you should not do that, because like you don't wear sandals with socks, it's wrong. And I'm like, why? I love drip coffee. And every time I make drip coffee at home, my mom's like, that's dirty water. I'm like, no, it's not. It's different. It's not a shot of espresso. It's drip, like it's actually different. But I don't know. It's kind of cute.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that just even the context in which we learn language affects like what we have in the different like ways that in some languages you can explain one thing that
right.
There's not a concept for in another one.
I cannot use they them pronouns when I'm in Italy. Again, I like both. I use both he and they interchangeably. And when I'm in Italy, I'm like, wait. I can't, because I always everything has to be gendered. So let's say I'm talking about a student of mine, I always use they, them. It is important what's their gender. I'm just talking about a student, you don't need to care whether, like, what's their gender, right? So if I do that in Italian, it has to be he, him. Because that is if you're not, I don't know how to explain it, but if you're not specifying the gender, the masculine gender is what, like, takes over. And I hate that. But, like, you can't, like, I'm not going to change an entire language, clearly, but.
And then I guess maybe you could say a little bit about, you've talked about this experience of living in other countries, and now you're about to move to Australia. Can you tell us about that?
I'm shooting bricks. No, so what I told myself is I've done it once. I have moved from Rome to Source, Connecticut. And at that time, it felt so far. So my brother had lived abroad, but in Europe. So no one in my family had moved across the ocean. And that felt so far away and like scary. But after many years, I realized, okay, it's not that far, you get used to it. And then I got a job in San Diego, so I moved further away from Rome. And my mom goes, oh, but that's even further. I'm like, yeah, but it's really not that different, right? So I guess slowly I got used to distances are only in your head, in the sense that if you want to stay close to a person, you can do that even if you're far away. So of course, not all of your friendships are going to survive, but I do have quite a few friendships from back in Italy, back in Connecticut, that are my closest friends. We're going to Australia. I'm scared because it's going to be a different continent, different culture. At least they speak English, so it's great, I have to learn a new language. I guess what excites me is that it's in a city. So something that I had realized about myself, especially after Connecticut, was I need to live in a big city. And Melbourne is just a melting pot of cultures, so many different people. It is a very queer alternative city. So I'm great. They have huge underground scene when it comes to bars and clubs. And I'm okay, I definitely can see myself living in a place like that. The thing that I'm tired about is just rebuilding yourself from scratch. So I think that was the part that I've gotten tired with my job. So I love my job, but the worst part of my job is job stability. So it takes you a long time before you can settle down. So moving to Connecticut the first time, great. No one knows me, so I can just do whatever I want, and rebuild my entire personality from scratch. And then San Francisco, same thing. San Diego, same thing. But then you realize that it takes a lot of energy out of you. Every time you go to a place and you're signing a lease and they ask you for an emergency contact, and you pause and you go, wait, I don't have an emergency contact here. And then you realize what's going to happen if I go to the like if something happens to me and I go to the ER, how long is it going to take before people are going to realize that, like, I am in a bad position? Like, but then you have to sort of, you see that thought arriving, you embrace it for a second and just put it aside, because like that cannot hinder you from like continue your life. What I've realized is the same thought, like it really helps you bonding strong connections with people in same positions. So when I moved to the US, there was this, now she's one of my best friends. She lives in New York City. She's an artist. And we do know this feeling of uncertainty. And so you kind of get the chance to choose your own family with people that even if you don't get to see them on a daily basis or like even monthly basis, but at least someone that you can call them, they're like, this happened to me, and they immediately know exactly how you're feeling because they have gone through the same things. So it's scary, but at least it allowed me to probably make the strongest connections that I've made in my life with people that are in the same position. So it's like a hate and love relationship. I'm like, I hate certain aspects, but then I always try to focus on the positive side, but that required a lot of mental health, like therapy, like journey, like to kind of accepting this is part of my job, but it doesn't have to be negative necessarily. I was pushed a lot. That's definitely what happened in my case, because I was in high school, and I liked math, but I wasn't really, oh my God, math. Like, it was fun, but not like, never thought of it as a career. And it was junior high, and I had an amazing teacher in junior high for math. I remember the day that I thought, this is actually cool, and maybe I could do something with it. She had a very cool personality. She was always challenging her students, and she would always say, you don't have to memorize formulas. Math is not about learning by art something. Math is about being creative and finding like an alternative solution to a problem and just like open your mind. And remember that she wrote this huge, like, I don't know, it was something on the board. It was just a long expression. And she looks at us and goes, so let's say this is a homework problem. You're at home, you see this, what are you gonna do? And then she said, you take a break. So you go to the kitchen, you make yourself a sandwich, you clear your mind completely. And then once you like relax, you go back to it and you start like brainstorming and try to solve this problem. And what I found fascinating was when she went through the solution, we went from this very long, complicated expression to something very simple. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, as in, like, you're just using a bunch of logical steps in a creative way to get to, like, a simpler answer. And in a way, to me, it always felt like an art form. Like an artist, there's like painting or something. Like, it's very, I think people have the misconception of math as being very dry, whereas it's actually a very, like, you need to know the language. So you do have to suffer a little bit. But then once you understand the language, which is made of, I guess, equations and formulas, it's like you know the alphabet and then you do poetry. You first learn the basics, but then you can do things with it, which is kind of cool. So that was junior high was the point when I thought, wait, I actually do like this. And then my senior year, my professor, she passed. And I was heartbroken because like we had such an amazing connection. I liked her. I just finished college, and in Italy you do have to declare your major before you start. And I thought maybe it'll be a philosophy major, maybe an art history. So math was kind of out of the options just because I was so hurt that she had passed. And I was like, now every time I do math, I'm thinking about her, or at that time I was like, I can't. And literally 2 days before like I had to enroll, because I've always waited until the very last minute to like do things. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a math major. So I did my undergrad in Rome. I was enjoying it. I made amazing friends. But then again, I met a professor. He was my advisor, Domenico, and he is like, you're not bad at this. Like, I was taking classes, but I never thought of being a mathematician as a potential career. I have to say, one of the things that my parents told me before I signed up for school, they were like, do something that you like. Because if you have to suffer, you're gonna suffer anyways when you're in college. So like, the least you can do is suffering while studying something that you may like. I was like, okay, that's a good point. And I remember this conversation with my dad. It was my freshman year. And we were in the car, and he goes, so you're getting a degree in math? And I'm like, yeah. He says, what are you gonna do with that? And I looked at him, I was like, I don't know. And then it was like this awkward silence. And then he said, do you like it? And I was like, yes, I do. And they said, okay, that's all that matters for now. And I'm like, great. So it was this kind of thing where I didn't know where I was going, but I was just studying. And then I was so lucky to have an advisor that kind of, I think, saw something in me and told me, you can really maybe try to make a career out of this. Why don't you apply for a PhD program? And I thought, I don't really know what even a PhD is, because again, there was no one in my family besides my brother had gone to school. So like for me, the college was just something everyone was doing, but not really knowing what I was doing there. And then so he pushed me and I realized, okay, let's apply for a program in the US. I remember deciding on the US over Europe because the grad school is longer in the US. It takes more time. And I thought, I have no idea what I want to do with my life, so let me buy myself 5 more years. And then hopefully by the time I finish with grad school, I'll know what I want to do in my life. Spoiler, it doesn't work that way. So I found myself in grad school. And at that time, I remember still not thinking of math as a career, in the sense that, of course, I knew that I would have gotten a job. If you have a math degree, you're gonna get a job. Like data scientist, data analyst, like insurance companies, there's like tons and tons of people are gonna want you. But I've always liked studying math and pure math. And I thought, I would like to do research, but I'm not willing to compromise everything in my life to stay in this path, because sometimes, you just apply for a job everywhere in the world and you hope that you get one. And I always thought, I'm not willing to move in the middle of nowhere, as much as I like this career. So my path was very traditional in the sense that I did everything that every person in math has done. I did my undergrad, I got my PhD, I applied for a postdoc, Postdoc is some kind of internship for academics. And then I applied for a tenure track, which is the job that I'm going to start in Melbourne. So that was very traditional. But I think what was not traditional was my approach, in the sense that I was never fully, not convinced. I wanted to, but I always had this thought in my head that don't get your hopes high, because maybe this is not going to happen. And if this doesn't happen, but then if you put if you get too positive and optimistic, then you're going to get hurt. So I was always on the fence. I'm like, this could be a career, but let's also see what the industry has to offer. But again, during my PhD, my advisor was an amazing person, and my postdoc mentor also both of them very supportive of my queerness, because when I was in school, I thought, this is who I am as a person, and so the person I am in my private life, I want that to be the person that I am in my workspace. And so for me, it was important for my advisor to know about my queerness, and she was very open and cool. So that was great. And again, another mentor that has believed in me and said, maybe this could be a career. So I think my path was very much, as I said, pushed by people, but I think I was just very lucky. I was lucky to have had amazing mentors that truly believed in me and told me this could be something that you could do. The people around me were always very pushy, but in a very good way. They're like, give it a try, do this, do that. I'm like, okay. And I made it so my parents, they went to school up to 5th grade, and then they had to leave. And so I was able to get a PhD, which for me was a huge accomplishment, because I didn't know what I was doing, but again, supportive family and supportive mentors was just how I made it through. And of course I liked math. That was always there, but yeah. So my perspective has changed very recently. I went to a conference that was called QMA, so Queer and Trans and Mathematical Analysis. And so we were bringing together people from the queer community and from the math community, which there aren't that many. And there was one talk, they gave us the percentage of people in R1 universities, so research university in the US, so people that identify as women who are professors of mathematics. It's 18%. And that's sad, because if you look at the global population, it's, I think, 51% women, 49 men. So usually you do want your workplace to reflect what's happening in the world. So definitely there is work to do. Yeah, so the workplace, I felt not out of place, but definitely there were moments at conferences, workshops, where I just felt that I was different. And because it's a field that is dominated by cis straight white men. So even being a woman that should not be a minority, but like it is in my area, in my field. So it's not the most, I don't want to say welcoming, because then I had great experiences, but also I'm aware that I got to work in Connecticut and California, which are blue states. And so, I don't know, every workplace where I've been at, they had all gender bathrooms. It was never a problem being out. Neither students nor colleagues. Everyone was very chill, which I do appreciate. Same with Melbourne. When I visited, they had all gender restrooms. They were very much aware of like what's happening in the world. They were using the correct pronouns to address me. I'm like, okay, those are small things that showed me that you care about, your employers. As I said, it really took me a long time to come out of the closet and to embrace the person that I am today, that I felt I have to be out, but I don't want to be two distinct people. And so but on the other hand, I do hate the idea that the queer community has to come out to someone else, because that immediately puts straight on it's an uneven field game. Because why don't straight people have to come out as straight? Why do I have to tell you that I'm gay, right? So I hate this imbalance of things. But on the other hand, I was like, I remember when I started grad school, I thought, I want people to know just to clear the air, but I don't want to tell them, because why should I tell? I'm like, they're not going to tell me they're straight. So and I remember once I had mentioned that I had an ex-boyfriend. I was like, great, that's gonna make it easier. I remember one of them joked that, oh, we weren't sure whether you were gay or just European. And I'm like, okay, this is I got that a few times, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But yeah, at that time, this guy was from New Jersey, and at that time I thought New Jersey was a district of New York. I did not know it was a state. So I was like, fair. As far as visibility is concerned in academia, there is a problem that we don't attract people that look different to pursue those careers. And one of the, I think, issues is that if you go to school and every single professor looks in a certain way, you're gonna see that not as a career that is, accepted for you. It's not as a possibility, because you don't see yourself, represented there. If every single professor you have, I don't know, always wear a suit and a tie, right? And I don't wear suit and ties. I mean, if I want to, I do, but most of the times I don't, right? I present myself in a certain ways. I have piercings, I have tattoos, and that is not the stereotype of what a scientist, an academic, or a professor looks like. And I think we should break that mold to be like, hey, there's a lot of us that don't look that way. But again, society has this idea of what a scientist should be. There is this thing called draw a scientist, picture a scientist, where if you ask someone to think of a scientist, they would think of Einstein. They're not going to think of a woman. And I think that is the problem, because then you don't see yourself represented, and you think, oh, maybe that's not my career path. That was one of the reasons why, for me, it was very important to stay in academia, because I thought, I wish I did not have a role model, right? So I wish I had a role model when I was younger, because had I had one, hopefully I would have come out sooner. I would have embraced my identity sooner, and I would have not been so self-conscious. And if I can be a role model for someone someday, or a mentor, for me, that would be a huge, huge accomplishment. One thing that I'm very proud of was having done academia in my own way. So I never ever compromised who I am as a person in my workplace. I was outspoken when I felt that I needed to be outspoken. I was saying things that my employer, the university I was at that moment, did not. I was not aligned with things that the university was doing, and I would be vocal about it. And then I remember one time, it was actually in San Diego, and we had this an anonymous teaching evaluation survey. One of the comments from the student, they said, "Oh, I really like your tattoos," because I have a lot of tattoos myself, and never seen a professor having tattoos. And for me, that was a huge accomplishment, because I just showed, even if it's just one person, they see that, because when I was younger, people were telling me, you should not get tattoos because you're not going to get a job. You're not going to get a good job if you have tattoos. And I have 5. I have a huge thigh tattoo, and I'm and I don't care. And so the fact that I was able to show this person that, hey, you can be yourself, do whatever you want. You don't have to compromise your identity, and you can still be fairly successful in whatever career path you choose. And you can do that even if everyone else or most of the people in that given career path don't look like you. Every time I feel down, I think about that comment, and I'm like, okay, I did some good. There was at least one person out of, I don't know, 500 students that felt seen and represented. And what else do you want? Like, what, as an educator, as someone who is working with students, you do want them to feel safe and to feel that they can do whatever they want. They don't have to feel hindered. This conference I went to, CUMA, I was, I think, mostly targeting the queer community, but it was open to every minority. Like, we had Black folks, Palestinian folks, we had a lot of trans. Like, that was my first time getting to meet a lot of people in the trans community that were also in academia, and it was so educating, because I don't know, like, they were mentioning issues that they were facing that me as a cis man, I did not have to face, like dead names and your publications, because when you publish a paper, you're gonna have a certain name, and then if you transition, you change your name, sometimes that publication is not gonna count because it looks as a different person, and then can you get it changed or not? So there were a lot of things that I personally never thought there were issues, and just hearing, sitting there, being quiet and just listening to people that had to face certain things, it was very intense, very emotional, a lot of crying, but also a lot of growth. When I was a grad student, I was very vocal about women in mathematics, and people were like, why do you care? Like, why are you so involved with women in mathematics? And I'm like, well, you don't need to be a woman to understand there are certain problems, like, in the community. I'm like, you don't have to, like, you can totally be a man, even straight man, to understand that if you're in a workplace with 80 people and 2 are women, this is not okay. And so it's not about what's in between your legs or how you identify, it's about just realizing that there is a problem. The more you're exposed to, the more you just sit, be quiet, and listen to people that have things to say, the more you can bring that to your own table, like in class. Because sure, I identify as a member of the queer community, but in class, you can mention things that are sort of like referring to like other minorities or like talking about other things. So yeah, it is just good to be exposed to as many different things as possible. I remember that name on paper, something that I had never thought about. I was like, that's bad, right? But like, now I do know that, and maybe I try to say that to someone who's not a trans person, because like, I remember this very similar to this conversation with a friend of mine a few years ago. She lives in Italy, and in Italy, when you're usually signing a form, there are 2 different options if you're a woman, and 1 option only if you're a man. And the 2 different options if you're a woman, one refers to whether you have a husband or not. I never thought that, because as a man, I would just like check the man box. I remember one day she told me, you know how frustrating it is that I am defined whether I have a husband or not? And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I never thought that, because my eyes never went to that section, right? The moment she said that, I was like, that's, we should not do something, but we should at least speak about it. Like, and so I would go talk to like other male friends of mine and be like, have you ever thought that like, that's a problem? Because again, you have to belong to a certain minority to to feel that given problem or issue on your skin. Sure, because I will never understand what's it like to be a woman giving a talk in front of 70 men. I will never understand that. But what I do understand if someone tells me that's bad. And I think everyone should be able to like understand that. Even if you're not a member of a minority, you should understand that there are issues. But unfortunately, that is not always the case. I once had a student that she had failed like a midterm or something, and so we were chatting, and then she mentioned to me, oh, I just broken up with my girlfriend, like, so I'm not doing well. And I thought that maybe she felt comfortable like sharing that, because I always make sure that whenever like I'm in a class environment, like everyone feels safe. And I think that being a member, that has nothing to do with specifically being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, But I guess just being a member of a historically marginalized group, you do want to make sure that everyone you're talking to feels safe, they feel like respected, and that everyone's opinion is like valuable. So I don't know, I guess when I teach or just when I'm in front of students, I always try to not like create a wall so that they feel, oh my God, we cannot interact with this person because they're very higher up and like we're here. I'm like, let's just all be on the same, like all I'm doing here is that I know more math than you know. Like that doesn't make me a better person. Like being like a professor doesn't make me cooler or better. It just makes me more knowledgeable in that specific field, period. But besides that, we can have a conversation about like things and life. And I don't know, I think my point is, if you have been marginalized for one reason or another, I think that does show when you are like in an education like environment. Some of my students really like that I was sharing my pronouns in class on first day of class, because for me it was a very normal thing to do. But apparently not many professors were like day one be like, oh, my name is X, Y, and Z, and my pronouns are like this and that. Like they just wouldn't do that. And I'm like, and I would. So like my students were feeling more, not seen, but definitely they were feeling safer to the point that, oh, this is someone that they are going to pay attention to, I guess, my identity or like thing. And I feel that once you show that to one specific minority, I like to think that even other minorities feel, oh, this is like, this is a person that cares about things. I really suffer from not having had a role model, or just every professor that I had when I was an undergrad was pretty much, they all looked the same. And I felt this is so boring. I don't just like, can you like, you can be in this career, but be a fun person, or always like diversify yourself from the bunch. I wish that this is like the message that I gave my students, that they feel that, okay, I can be like myself and, maybe one day be like an engineer or whatever they want to be, but without giving up or compromising their personalities or like feelings or things. Yeah. To younger Marco, I would say clap back. I would say just clap back, because I was being called names and like made fun of. And my reaction at that time was, I want to be invisible. Because, if no one sees me, they're not gonna be able to like call me names, right? And I would just grab myself and just shake me, right? And be like, just say something. You're a smart person, you're intelligent, you're like, I know, you're interesting, like just say something, stand up for yourself and love yourself more. That's the comment I would like totally give myself. To someone who's interested in pursuing a career in STEAM, I would say try, meaning it might work, it might not work. But if you do have something that you think you're passionate about, you're curious about, then I think you should give it a try. And that is not my advice, that was my parents' advice that they gave me, because again, they did not have access to education at that time. And so when I was growing up, they had told me, you want to minimize the number of regrets you have in life. If you think you like math, go to school for math. Worst case, what's gonna happen? You're gonna change major. Great, so you're gonna quote unquote waste a year of your life, but that might save you the next 30 years of your life. So I would say if there is something that you think it's your, like, I know, it's your passion or something that, because maybe you'll try it and after you'll be like, you know what, this is not what I had expected. Great, at least now you know that's not for you. Instead of always, maybe in 10 years from now thinking, oh, what if I had gone, to school for that? Or what if I had, taken that class or something? Like, just try.